This is a production of Cornell University.
All right, let's take this to the next level, and let's actually think about an agricultural system, okay? This is a forested watershed, and this is an agricultural watershed. We're looking at the organic phosphorus. We're looking at different P's here, P pools. This is the organic pool, this big green one here. This white one is the inorganic, okay? You'll notice that the phosphorus pool in the forested system that is the largest is the organic phosphorus pool. Okay, the smaller is in the forest in the agricultural system. All right, so the question is why? Why would we see this be a larger pool than this? More biomass. Okay, in this system I have much more biomass. It's not to say that I don't have biomass here, but generally in forested systems there's more trees, there's more biomass per acre. Okay, now look at these two pools, the inorganic pool. Why is this pool so much larger? Actually, let me take a step. Let's go back. Why is this pool so much smaller? The same question, but a different perspective. This one has the fertilizer. Okay, we're adding fertilizer. We're making this pool very large so that we can maximize the amount of mineralization of phosphorus that's available. The reality is most of this fertilizer is not going to be available for the plants, but because I'm just putting so much of it in, some of it's going to go. Right? We have some inputs here, primarily weathering. Okay? Most of that weathering material is basically staying there because it's slowly being released. If it's slowly being released, the organic matter has a chance to capture it before it's lost from the system. Now granted, this stuff will die and potentially put it back in, okay, either through precipitation or through mineralization. But because these rates are so slow, the phosphorus is being lost from the system. Very tight systems. Okay. This system, on the other hand, is very leaky. Yes, I'm still getting the same amount because I have biomass that is being cycled so much faster. These fluxes are a lot larger. Okay. Because I'm still getting the weathering, because I'm getting more fertilizer, I'm putting so much inorganic P, available P, for plant uptake, but because there's so much more of it, I'm going to be losing a lot of it. Okay? Not all of this is going to be going into those forms that are unavailable. I'm just putting so much in this system. Now, why am I seeing these huge fluxes? Or I should say these huge losses. Yes, if I throw this fertilizer in here, supposedly it should be binding with the calcium and or aluminum iron. Shouldn't it? Okay, yes, some of it's going to be available, and I'm going to lose some of it. But look at the size of these losses. What's going on? And this goes back to a question that came earlier. The question of, are there scenarios where there's just not enough calcium to bind? Okay? Now this is a slide from your book, okay? This slide right here, okay? Now, let's take a look at this slide right here first, actually, okay? These are soils, and there are 3 different soils, and we're basically looking at phosphorus levels in these 3 different soils. The dark green soil is a native soil. Imagine it being a forested soil. The dashed green, solid green line here is basically pasture area, like a cows, like organisms, ungulates grazing. The dotted line right here is basically an intensive dairy situation, okay, where I've got a CAFO operation and I'm basically taking the manure and I'm spreading it, like a lot of cows, and I'm spreading it on my soil. Okay? Look at the amounts of phosphorus in the surfaces of those soils. Okay? The first two, the native and the pasture, the native very low levels. The pasture, you can see a little bit of accumulation up at the surfaces, but the CAFO operation where we're spreading that manure, huge jump. Well, that's not necessarily a problem because I'm going to have calcium and or iron and aluminum depending on my pH in the soils, and most of that stuff's going to be bound up. And that's what we're looking at here. Okay? This is an increase in soil phosphorus level as we move up, okay? And this is time. And you'll see these steps here. These are basically, each one of these risers here is basically me going out there and dumping manure. Well, what's going to happen to that phosphorus that's in the manure? In all likelihood, it's going to be binding to the calcium if it's a high pH or the iron and aluminum. But the question is, what happens right about here? This line basically here represents the P fixing capacity. It's the ability of the soil to fix, put in those inorganic pools into a form that are insoluble. So either the calcium pool or the iron and aluminum pool. Now the reality is these soils only have so much calcium and or iron and aluminum. You're going to reach a point right about here where the soils can't fix them anymore. We call this the P saturation level. P fixing capacity is met, at which point the soil is saturated with phosphorus. At that point, this line right here basically represents the phosphorus that's in the drainage water. The phosphorus that's leaving these soils through leaching. What happens at this point when you meet that fixing capacity? Huge increase in my phosphorus. The soils can't hold anymore because they don't have any more calcium and or iron and aluminum. Does that make sense? Yeah? Environmental consequence. Now the truth is, as this starts going up, I'm going to see more and more available for my crops, but there's a point at which it's going to be leaving the system. I cannot add any more. Go.
What time period is this over?
The time period, I mean, if we look at this, it looks like it's maybe 10 years, but the time period has to do with what this riser really is. How much manure, how much phosphorus I'm adding to the soil. Now, there are ways of dealing with this, and many farms are now dealing with composting operations where they basically take this material and they ship it off somehow. Fessenden is a really good example of this, where they are composting their material and they basically sell it to greenhouse operations, to landscapers, to homeowners. Okay? In essence, they're thinking of this as another farm product. Dairy operations, what do they have? They have basically two products. They actually have three products. One is milk. Right? That's their product. That's how, if you think about the budget of a farm, okay, stuff comes in, stuff goes out. What's leaving the farm? Milk. And that's the traditional farm operation. The newer farm operations are thinking, well, what else can I get off the farm? Because I have to get stuff on the farm to feed my animals. Okay, if I'm bringing in feed, that means I'm bringing in the phosphorus with that feed. Okay, and if I've reached this level, I can get rid of some of that in the milk. But I need to be able to get rid of more of it. So they're thinking of their manure, they're composting it, and they're selling it. Okay? What other source are on farms? What other product do farms have? What? Calves? Is that what somebody said? Well, yeah, I guess they do have calves. I wasn't thinking that. I was actually thinking urea or urine. Okay, they got liquid waste, they got solid waste, and solid waste is bedding as well as manure. Okay, and then they have liquid product, which is milk. And that's how they deal with this. If I can reduce that riser, it takes me a lot longer to get there. And if I increase my crops are going to be taking more of it out. Go.
Is the phosphorus in the drinking water, is that like all forms?
I don't have the correct answer for that one. I think it's pretty much all forms. But if it's all forms, you can certainly imagine if this is a phosphate form, if it moves down system, there's potentially material down there that it can bind with. But it's coming in as particulate matter as well as, and if this is near a stream, if my farm is way up in the hinterlands and there's no streams anywhere near, you can imagine that much of this P, if it's going in through groundwater, is going to go and be bound with calcium. But the minute this hits the stream, there's no calcium for it to bind with anymore, at which point it's gone. Go.
This is going back to the previous slide, but how do you manage stalls in tropical rainforests? Because it's really acidic, and if you add like fertilizers, it's going to destroy everything.
Right, so the question is, if you're thinking about tropical systems where the soils are really acidic, okay, if you're adding phosphorus, where's it going to be going? Well, it's going to be going into this iron and aluminum bound. And that's where it gets into this issue. You know, it becomes this. You know, I'm adding fertilizer, what's going to happen to it? Well, most of it's going to be going here. The concept is you want to get some of it going that way. Okay, well, the problem is the amount of money that you're paying for this, you want to get more of this, and you don't want to get this leaving the system, and you don't want to get captured. So really, I mean, from a phosphorus management sense, you have basically two sources. One is this, and one is that. You know, and which makes you think, well, I want to deal with how I can maximize this and minimize these. Now, maybe adding this, I mean, that could be on-site sourcing, but this also could potentially help you with your pHs. The thought is minimizing this, maximizing this. I really want to start thinking about pH management and some of the other strategies. Okay, and I will add, and this is somewhat controversial, but I will add, if you think about where we're mining our phosphorus, those mines are basically, I mean, Morocco, I think Wyoming, Florida, those mines are running out of phosphorus. Okay, we're going to be running into some serious issues with phosphorus fertilizer availability, which means this pool is going to this source is going to get more and more expensive, which means managing this and potentially adding this becomes more and more important. Go.
Why was it that phosphorus deficiency leads to increased nitrogen fixation?
Right? So,
Because there's less plants growing to fix the nitrogen.
so P deficiency inhibits microbial N fixation. Well, if there isn't phosphorus, phosphorus is part of the, it's an enzymatic reaction that phosphorus is part of the enzyme that basically does the nitrogen fixation needs phosphorus. And so if there isn't any phosphorus, the microbial population that does the nitrogen fixation can't do it. It's not like the microbes are dead. It's they literally can't fix the nitrogen. Does that make sense? Yeah, beyond that, I don't know enough about it. It's an enzymatic reaction. It's part of the protein, but other than that, I don't know. But okay, any other questions? Do we feel comfortable with this so far? Okay, this took entirely more time than I thought I was going to talk about. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold off on potassium. Okay, we have 5 more minutes, and so what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to break you guys up into groups, and we're going to be doing a connections game.
This has been a production of Cornell University, on the web at cornell.edu.